Howdy, folks. Ben with a little jingle to start us off. Welcome to episode 5 of Unqualified Film Bros. The 4 Unqualified Film Bros of the podcast. Whatever you want to call us, we're going to be on the same YouTube channel, same playlist. I'm George. You guys know me. I said that last week. Fellas?
I am Ben. I write jingles.
I'm Declan. I wish I wrote.
And I'm Max, and I'm here for the second week in a row for the first time ever.
Woo!
Hell yeah.
Proud of you.
Yeah.
4 United. We are talking about something that we've been looking forward to since we started this show early last month, and that is Denis Villeneuve, which I looked it up. That's how you pronounce his name. French-Canadian filmmaker, his remake of Dune.
His remake, we're going there.
Is it not a remake?
It's no. That's not fair because it's an adaptation.
Exactly.
A second adaptation.
Yes.
Yeah. He's not remaking David Lynch's Dune.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to be talking about the 1984 David Lynch film Dune.
My favorite film of all time.
David Lynch's favorite film he's ever made.
Kyle MacLachlan's favorite role.
I mean, it was really fun to film. And besides, that was his first role, and he was filming with Sting and Patrick Stewart.
I haven't seen any of it, so I can't comment on it honestly. But wow, interesting.
You need to look up. It's like 2 minutes. Look up the Gurney ball fight from the 1984 film. You can see their shields, and they're like little boxes, blue boxes. You can barely even see that there are people inside. It looks like Minecraft characters fighting or something. It really looks like something out of the 80s Tron, like the original.
Interesting.
Like that level of effects. It's just so fake and hilarious to look at. I really like the shields in the new one, but let's get into the film before
the actual movie we're talking about, Denis Villeneuve's Dune.
Yes, 2021 adaptation of the all-time great science fiction novel from the 60s. General thoughts, or you guys want to dive right in?
So I got to sum up my general thoughts, for it. It's just quick, the good and the bad kind of. I would say the good ugly of the film, one of the most beautifully realized worlds I've ever seen on film. Easily stands among the greats. In my opinion, I feel like it can easily stand among the greats like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, and just sheer craftsmanship and beauty in what is achieved on screen. As a negatives, given the hype, the fact that Denis Villeneuve didn't appear on screen and stare directly into the camera and say, Declan, I know things are tough sometimes, but I believe in you, and I think you're a good person. And
I just want to point out that not only did Declan text us those exact words last night after he saw the movie, but that's verbatim from his Letterboxd review of the film.
I texted you those exact words, and I'm making fun of the hype now just because I need to explain the joke in case anyone's confused by what I mean. Dune is very hyped up. I think deservedly so now that I've seen it, but I also it didn't quite meet the sheer heaven levels of hype, but that's not the fault of the film. That's just because of how much people are praising it, at least in my opinion.
I suppose it's also because it's the first part. A lot of the big stuff happens in the second part. So it's a bit like Lord of the Rings. It's like Fellowship of the Ring. It's like, it was fun. And it's a great film, but you don't encounter any of there's no big battle or whatever until Two Towers and Return of the King, obviously. And I think that's sort of Dune gets a lot of the action in the second half.
Yeah,
Can I?
the first part, as it was framed, as soon as the film started, was Dune Part One. It felt very much like a part one. Like there are two part stories that feel like two halves of a whole. Um, Honestly, first one that comes to mind is the adaptation of the seventh Harry Potter book. It was made into two films.
Yeah.
You clearly felt like the end of the first film was a halfway point. It wasn't, oh, this is the end of a movie and then another movie is starting. Other side of the coin, Avengers 3 and 4, Infinity War and Endgame were originally Infinity War Part 1 and 2, but even though they are one story of the Avengers fighting Thanos, they're still two separate entities.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
It's
Dune
like
Part
event.
1, yeah. Dune Part 1, and I said this just 30 seconds ago, it felt like a part one. You get the world building, you introduce these characters, bringing people into the world, this beautiful, visually pleasing, aesthetically magnificent world of the novel brought to life. And you see the first half of a story and where it leaves off, where Paul is going off with, and I am blanking on the name, even though I just saw the movie.
Jessica. Yeah.
Yes.
Right?
Lady Jessica.
Lady
Mhm.
Jessica, where House Atreides basically is reduced to rubble, and they're going off to form this alliance that Leto talked about at the beginning of the film, at the beginning of the novel. It feels like a halfway point. And
Mhm.
I think a lot of what was set up in this film was not only paid off in part in, small increments in the later, the third act of this film, but I think a lot of it will be paid off in part
Mhm.
two, due out October of 2023.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So very,
I mean,
very, very much a first part.
this is the kind of first part where I'm okay with it being set up, right? Like I hadn't read Dune before. I still haven't read Dune.
Neither have I.
But it felt like uh the movie was taking its time and setting up the world, introducing me to the characters, and that's important, right? And I think the difference between the adaptation of book 7 of the Harry Potter series is that the first part of Deathly Hallows kind of was just them running around in the woods doing like one thing, and then eventually making their way back to Hogwarts. And then the second one was just a big old battle for like 2.5 hours, which was awesome. But it didn't feel necessary. This feels more like an Infinity War and Endgame type situation where it will be contained stories, but with storylines that go through and connective tissue. And that's what I like. That's what I would prefer in a part 1 and part 2 of a movie series like this.
It's been a while since I've read the book, but the point at which like they stop in the movie in part one is not like halfway. It's like relatively maybe like a third.
Really?
So they do spend a lot of time like there is a lot of the world that you need to build up, especially for the story to make sense. If you don't understand like spice is important, the role of the Bene Gesserit, the role of like the imperial system and all the different houses. If you don't have that set up, then like the story doesn't work, and also like the dreams and stuff. I think it did a really good job setting up the characters, and that different houses, and then all of the different systems like the Bene Gesserit, the Furmans, and then like the role that Paul is to have is the Kavaz
The
Havarot.
one.
Yeah, I think that's how it is. Kavaz Havarot.
Yeah. I will say in my opinion, I feel like again I'm completely Dune neophyte as Max said. I now feel like crap. I should have moved Dune up higher on my to read list, but how it goes.
You got until part two.
2 years,
True, very true. But
23 months.
Re- regardless, I feel like they were on the exact edge of like explaining and on how much they were explaining, in that I feel like they explained enough where I understood it all, but if they had gone just like a centimeter further, it might have been too much, and that is a balancing act.
Yeah, they did a great balance with that, where it's moving the plot forward as you're learning about the world. It's not just like the beginning is just like all this stuff. The Lord of the Rings actually does that, but I feel like that one kind of works.
Given how good the voiceover and the visuals are in that, I feel like it does work.
In the David Lynch one, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I'm pretty sure they have a similar thing for the Emperor's daughter. I forget her name. Heirloom? But
Chief Palpatine?
Yeah, she's Palpatine. No, she gets. There's some spoilers. She gets married to Paul later on, but so she is like doing an entire voiceover of the spice and everything, and it's so cheesy, it just doesn't work. But I felt like they did a really good job.
I could tell how beautiful, like again, how rich and beautiful the world is, but it's also like, okay, just barely managing to keep up. Denis, you can't go further. You can't do this to me, and he never does. And that's real credit to him, like being able to like just keep everyone in it.
I'll be interested to see how he does part 2, because there's some crazy like stuff that happens. And I don't know how much he's going to explain the spice, but there's like a cool war that's explored.
Poe Dameron, Spice Runner, runner of spice.
Ben, I'm curious, are you worried that part 2 will become overstuffed with explanation and exposition, or do you think that because of the way that the world is set up right now, that the film doesn't necessarily need to do that, and that Villeneuve knows that?
It's tough. I think that there is a way to do it, but yeah, you do have to be careful. While there is a lot of action, there's a lot of like concepts that are still brought up later on, especially when Paul sort of acclimates to the Furmans. He learns more about like the Bene Gesserit and like his prophesized part. There's a whole thing of like taking the spice of agony, which is like this painful ritual that the Bene Gesserit go through to become like a Reverend High Mother, and then Paul has to go through. There's never been a man who has gone through this process and like survived. It's prophesied as, the first man to do it. Obviously, Paul does it. He's the Kavat's Havarats, like chosen one, destined to like bring about another jihad, I think. I remember correctly.
Yeah, one thing that you mentioned. One thing you mentioned a minute ago, Ben, was that this isn't half. This is it's scratching the surface in that it's, would you say, like roughly a third of the novel?
I'd say a little over a third.
A little, almost like
halfway point,
like 40%, we'll say.
Yeah,
somewhere around there. This first film, 2 hours 36 minutes. So I mean, Endgame was 3 hours. Return of the King was 320. So
we get a long movie.
part 2, we're in for something truly epic, I think, if done well. And this first one was excellent. So we have no reason to assume it won't be done well. But it's gonna be long.
Villeneuve is like a huge Dune fan. It's like his favorite book.
Oh wow!
Also his favorite book, or at least they say these things. It's at least one of their favorite books.
So
you really see it. Like
Hmm.
they clearly know the world, and I think that makes all the difference when you're adapting something like Dune.
Mm-hmm.
so in terms of the movie viewing experience, I know at least one of us saw it in the theater. I personally watched it on HBO Max. How did anyone first? Did anyone watch it twice, once each way?
I haven't yet, but I need to go see it in the theater.
Okay. Just the difference of experience, because I watched it on my laptop with headphones, so I had like the screen right in front of my face. I I was trying to immerse myself as much in the world as possible. But I feel like with a film this visually striking, and it's just a gorgeous film, you know, practical locations. They were on location in the desert shooting most of this film.
Mhm.
You know, you're not using green screens, you're not using VFX. Very little CGI in terms of the actual location of it all. So is, and I know the answer to this already, but what more is gained from the big screen experience for this film for someone like me who watched it on a small screen?
One
Like
of
the
the big
loser I
things,
am.
one of the big things I actually think is not necessarily the bigger screen, which I think the bigger screen does help capture like the grand scale of the world. You're looking at planets here, you know, Caliban, Getty Prime, and then Arrakis. I think that definitely makes a difference. But the bigger thing is, like I was talking, Hans Zimmer created like 2 scores for this movie because he loved the idea so much and he loved the book. And you can really tell that there is some really unique sounds and like
Oh yeah.
songs that come out of it. And I don't think it captures it all unless you're getting like some good, you know, subwoofers and good surround sound.
Mm.
There's a lot of bass, a lot of bass. And if you don't have proper equipment, it's just going to sound muddled.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like, can I just very quickly say an anecdote kind of related to that?
I hope it's related. Go on.
Similar on the seeing it at home versus the screen experience. I first watched The Many Saints of Newark, the Sopranos movie, at home on the TV and all that, and it was good. You know, I really liked it. And I remember the first part, the very I'll just say without spoiling anything, the very opening scene where you sort of hear muttered whispers, kind of while panning through an area. Then when I heard it in theater, it's like I could very clearly hear like, oh, this is referring to this person, and this sound is referring to this person. It completely changed how I experienced the opening scene. And I feel like in some ways made it all thematically a bit more cohesive somewhat. And so it just, what I'll say is I can imagine that Dune probably, even if it doesn't have anything directly like that, could probably have
No, I was about to say there are things directly like that. There's like one moment where he's out getting like the spice, the harvester, and it's being attacked by a sandworm. And when he gets the spice in his lungs, he hears like a little voice. And it's like for the Kavas Haras to, you know, rise, Paul Atreides must die, or something like that. Or fall. I can't remember the exact word, but
Yeah.
And
yeah,
you
there
know,
are
I saw it.
that. And then there's also like the most famous one is like Fear is the Little Death, and Lady Jessica's like, you know, half whisper yelling it. But I feel like unless you have like a good enough sound system, you can't hear everything that's going on. And that's like the most famous passage from the book.
Yeah.
Other than
And
like,
some of that is, you know, Ben, you talked about scale. Like when they introduce some of these new planets, the sound that the music comes out of the speakers with is deafening, and it's supposed to be disconcerting. It's supposed to be shocking. And the same with when Paul gets the spice in his lungs. I saw it in theaters. you almost couldn't really understand what was going on. And I think that was part of it, where you're in the theaters, it's supposed to be loud, but it's not necessarily supposed to be clearer in that scene. It's supposed to be confusing, just like it is for Paul in that situation.
Yeah.
Mm.
No, I think it's just like you're supposed to hear. I feel like you can't even hear it unless your volume is loud enough. So
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of little details like that that you're not gonna quite get the same experience unless. I mean, I didn't go see it in the theater, but I have like a theater here.
Mm.
So I got like all the equipment
Bragging.
stuff to do it. But just having that experience is necessary for a film like this.
Cool.
I can imagine the theater experience can only enhance a movie as good as this one. And can I just random tangent, but just one thing I also want to praise.
Sure.
I haven't seen any of David Lynch's Dune, but I have seen brief clips of it. And one of them is I feel like I've seen either an image or a brief clip of like the sandworms in it. And I feel like that's a famous image from Dune, but it's very easy to do it in a cheesy or like not terrible, but like in a way that just sort of like quasi lame. And so I really gotta praise them for making the sandworm. I think that I only barely know about, like, feel like this like awe-inspiring beast of.
And they are really important. Like they're very important. They actually produce spice. They're responsible for it.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah. Even better, like given how important they are to the world, like this is something you don't want to have be lame looking. And so the fact that they just made them so like they didn't just feel like weird Sarlacc pits or something.
Yeah,
like
no,
that, or a hand in a puppet or a very bad CGI.
And I feel like they really captured like the size of it. It's huge, and I loved all like the teeth and stuff.
Yeah, the vibe I got, obviously we've all seen the original Star Wars trilogy. We know what we all know what the Sarlacc pit looks like. That was the first impression I got, but there was another Star Wars connection I made with the sandworms, and that is to the first episode of season 2 of The Mandalorian with the crate dragon on Tatooine, and just the way it moved through the sand and was this larger than life being sharing the world with the villagers, the people of the area. And obviously we know George Lucas was a fan of Dune.
What?
In making his Star Wars films, but just to be able to draw connections between sci-fi franchises in ways that are not only similar in, like what I just said, the way it moves through the sand or its physical appearance, like the Sarlacc pit, but are completely separate ideas. Just being able to have the sandworms serve its purpose and to have these ideas in Star Wars serve theirs while having that level of connection. I think that was a really cool moment for me when I was watching the film, was to make that observation.
Yeah, no, definitely. And yeah, they got a lot of Star Wars from Dune. I would say the one thing that is different is Star Wars was based around, well, first of all, like George Lucas, big Methodist, I think. What he was, but he put a lot of like Christianity in it, Force is supposed to be like the Holy Spirit and stuff.
Also Eastern religions.
Yeah, I mean he took some of the plot from the Hidden Fortress.
And Obi-Wan Kenobi in the prequel trilogy is basically Jesus.
Sorry,
not to be blasphemic or sacrilegious.
Technically, Jesus in Star Wars is Anakin Skywalker. born from a virgin.
The prophesized chosen one.
Chosen one, born from a virgin.
Mhm.
They're the Force.
There was no father.
But the one thing that is different, and it rings more true for like a Western religion like Christianity, is there's a very much a good versus evil.
Mm.
Pretty absolute. And even though there is some levels of it where, you know, Obi-Wan and like Yoda were willing to give up on Vader, but Luke never was. With Dune, you'll find there is a much finer line between good and evil. And leaders like Leto and Paul are subject to many tough decisions where they lose either way.
Mm.
Yeah.
And they sometimes have to
just
do terrible things to survive.
just look at, spoiler alert, Leto's death.
Yeah.
That's kind of a Sophie's choice moment for him.
Mm.
It's like, this is my only real path here, and hopefully it gets me, it gets my family, my house,
Mhm.
my legacy to where I want it to go, even without me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And of course, it doesn't work.
I mean, he gets a
Well,
lot of
he
people.
kills the Mentat, which is
Yeah.
pretty important.
Yeah.
Mentats are like extremely, extremely important to all the houses.
Mhm.
They are like their personal computer, essentially. Thinking machines are banned in the Dune universe due to a war like 10,000 years ago.
Oh.
10,000 years ago, which in Dune time is like 1900 years ago for us.
I don't know what the. It's a
'Cause
weird.
it's 10,181 AD.
10,180.
I thought
That's
it was
when-
I thought it was 97. There was a 97 there. No, never mind. I don't know.
So they established their system after like the guild navigators, essentially since
Space travel.
yeah, but a special type of space travel. I'm forgetting the name, but it's like warp speed essentially.
Mm.
You fold time, and they set a new time for that. It was after like a big war with
Well,
AI,
one thing that Lady Jessica talks about with Paul is his ability, and as the convergence of these two bloodlines, is the ability to bend time and space, bring together past and future.
Mm.
And so those ideas of warp speed and the space-time continuum, those are going to come together in a big way in part 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's less hard sci-fi, more soft sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Because the way that comes together is, again, I talked about the spice of agony. When you take that and survive, you are like sent to this realm. I think it's like the golden path for Paul.
The Shadow Realm.
Shadow
Quantum realm.
You can see and know all of your old ancestors. And so Paul.
That's a way to get Oscar Isaac back for the second movie.
So for females, you can only see female ancestors. For males, so the Kavats, Havarats, you can see like everyone you came from.
Kind of messed up there.
Leto is there. And I think it's called the golden path, or like his chosen path that they lead him towards. I'm a little rusty on the later details. Some of the stuff comes from like the sequel books. Where like he's got a son, Leto 2, named Leto 2 the younger, because he had a Leto 2, but that one died, so we.
Wait, his name is literally Leto 2.
Leto the second,
Oh, okay. okay. Still.
Leto the second.
Aye.
The second Leto the second.
It's like a joke from The Simpsons. I mean, not Leto, but Snowball.
So I'd be really curious to see if they do the sequels, because there's some even weirder stuff that goes on. So
that was written by his son, right? Frank Herbert's son.
So he wrote the ones involving Leto,
Hmm.
Frank Herbert's son Brian Herbert wrote, I think, a lot of the prelude stuff. He's responsible for fleshing out like the war, the
Oh yeah.
genocide, all the thinking machines were banned,
Hmm.
if I remember correctly.
I say this as someone who genuinely doesn't know. I feel like I've heard they're like, I mean, controversial is not the right word, but it's like some people feel they aren't as good as Frank Herbert's books. Is it? Would you say that's the case, or like, what would you
Sure.
say?
Yeah, no, he's not Frank Herbert, but he still does a reasonable job, and he takes, I think, a lot of ideas that his father was thinking about.
Hmm.
I think it's also like there's a level to how much you add to a universe before it doesn't seem as significant.
Hmm.
Which, even if they're written by Frank Herbert, I think it happened before he passed, and he was still writing books. Some of them were less popular than others.
Hmm. Hmm.
But overall, the Dune universe is still extremely popular.
Hmm.
But so Leto the Second turns into a sandworm, like we were talking earlier. So I'd be really curious. They did a good job with sandworms. I don't know how they
How do they pull that one off?
into the sandworm
Hmm.
over 3,500 years, I might add. Happens over a long period
Well,
of time.
Time and
Wow.
space are relative.
True. You know, can I give
Go
one
ahead.
criticism of Dune? I guess
Yeah.
Go for it.
the one thing that I don't know if it's the film's fault or my fault, but given that I felt like I understood everything else, I will say it was a little bit the film's fault. The character of the Baron,
Mhm.
I feel like because
Stellan
they didn't-
Skarsgård, what a performance.
Yes, 100%, 100%. The one thing I gotta criticize, given that they never showed his face in the first scene he's in, there was like, I like genuinely like didn't fully understand who he was until much later into the later into the film than I would have liked. There was honestly a point where I was like, wait, is he the emperor? Like, oh, is the emperor, really fat and actually evil? Like, eventually I figured it out. Don't get me wrong.
I think this is your fault because they do address that in that scene. I remember that scene.
Okay.
Because what's his name?
Mhm.
Rabin.
The Dave Bautista's character.
Yeah, Dave
His nephew.
Bautista's character.
Yeah, his nephew.
Yeah, so he's got two nephews. He's one of them. He's like the rash one.
Mm.
He says, uncle, how can you let them do this to us? Like let them take our our empire or our trade and everything we worked for.
True.
Um,
What needed
and it
to
also-
happen was them
It
to
also
look into
says when it goes to Getty Prime, it says homeworld of the Harkonnens.
what they needed to do was have a character look into the stream and go, "Hello, the Baron of the Harkonnens. Hi
Yeah.
there. You are the people who just recently owned the planet, but have now lost him to the main characters. How do you feel about this, the Baron?" And just have everyone stare at the camera and like have it written out on a chalkboard. I think
I
that
will
would have
So
say,
been.
like,
Declan wants a soap opera.
Mhm.
I
if
think that's
Robert
clear.
wanted it to be a little more mysterious and like, hey, I'm the Baron.
Yeah, if this movie got any more exposition heavy, it would be the Eternals.
Yeah.
Oh no, it's
I'm
Is
mostly
that
mostly
a hint that George wants to move on to an Eternals
that's not
preview?
it. That's not at all a hint. But Max, since you brought no, I'm just kidding. Final thoughts. Final
Wow.
thoughts on Dune.
Gonna put that on me.
What do you? Final thoughts on Dune.
Fantastic film. New can easily go in among the best of cinematic world building. Didn't quite reach the hype level for me, but that's because no film could have ever reached the level of hype I was seeing for it. I want to read the book. Can't wait to see the sequel.
That's fair. I don't know. I've just been like talking about Dune, so obviously it's pretty clear I like the film. Hopefully part 2 is as good as the first.
Um, gonna echo everything that was said. I really enjoyed it. Enjoyed the world building. Loved the politics of it. And loved the discussion of colonization and just sort of the way that the characters navigated that. And also just sort of the meta politics of Denis and casting all of these Marvel actors after having criticized the MCU. I just thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
Admittedly, like casting actors nowadays almost like inevitably will lead to someone involved in the MCU unless you
Exactly.
like go out of your way.
Yeah, I mean,
No, it
even,
was just
even
funny the
Oscar
pure
Isaac.
scope of how many of them were in it. And, you know, you had Josh Brolin playing who was Thanos in the MCU, of course, and then playing essentially like a
He's using
servant
his
type
Thanos
character. And, like,
voice.
yeah, I know.
And to be fair, he does that in half of his roles. So
True.
That's true.
True.
I've
He's
got
been doing
4
that
words
for
for
a
you,
while.
Ben. Men in Black 3, which I actually haven't
Where he
seen.
sounds like Tommy Lee Jones.
Yeah, he does a good Tommy Lee Jones. That was
He
like the
does.
first role I've ever seen Josh
Oh,
Brolin
man.
in.
That was the one where Will Smith goes back in time to like save his dad or something.
Mhm. Not to save his dad, but to
Save-
stop an invasion.
Save K.
Oh yeah, save K. He
Save
has
his
to have
dad.
his dad die or something.
Yeah, exactly.
that's
It was kind of like a twist that was added that not added that comes up only in the third act and it's like
Yeah.
not
It, like,
it,
yeah. From what I've read, it kind
He's
of like,
just there as a kid. But yeah,
from what I've read, it kind of like retcons the beginning of the first film.
It
Yeah.
Which
does.
is like, they've been watching Jay the whole time. And so,
Mm.
you know, but again, I haven't seen Men in Black 3. I'll probably get to it at some point. It's
Pretty
something
fun.
I've said for the last 9 years.
Wasn't that good? Not
It's
all right.
in terms of my final thoughts on Dune, I've been talking about this one since I saw that it was announced however many years ago it was, and then it was delayed. Was always very excited to see this, you know, iconic sci-fi novel adapted with modern effects. You know, I've never seen the 1984 film.
Everyone loves it.
I know you do,
watch
Declan.
it.
But then to see just a stellar cast attached to it and the performances across the board, you know, every word had weight, every action had significance to move the story forward. And I think it was the strength of the cast in addition to the great script and the world building and the visual aesthetic of it that really elevated this film to another level. I think it's on a high tier in modern science fiction filmmaking.
Mhm.
No, definitely.
So Dune is in theaters. It's available on HBO Max for another 2 weeks until it is removed from the platform for a few months as it plays out its time in theaters. Dune 2 coming October 2023. We don't know too much about it yet. A few of the cast members have confirmed that they're returning. Obviously, some who have died on screen.
Leaves. No.
Yeah, they're going to recast
Timothy
Timothy
Chalamet
Chalamet.
is not coming back.
Yeah, they're actually going to put Tom Holland in that role.
They're gonna see who can
Bringing
tell the
Chalamet
difference.
comes back.
Um,
Chalamet was-
and Timothy Chalamet is going to be in Spider-Man No Way Home as Dr.
Yeah.
Octopus. So Dune, our general consensus is great film. Watch it if you haven't.
Mhm.
Now I am going to turn the floor over to the three of you. We talked about this at the end of last week's episode. We're going to preview Eternals, which comes out. There are some screenings going on as we're recording this right now, Thursday, November 4th. Movie officially premieres Friday, November 5th. I was fortunate enough to attend an early screening on Wednesday the 3rd. So I have my own thoughts about it. I'm going to see it again on Tuesday of next week before we talk about Eternals for most, if not all, of next week's episode. But based on what you guys have seen from trailers, cast interviews, knowledge of the comics, what are you looking for in the 2 hours and 36 minutes of Eternals?
Wait, is it actually 2 hours and 36 minutes as well?
Yeah, it's the exact same runtime as Dune.
What the hell? Wait, wow, sorry. I'm surprised.
It's actually funny that Eternals and Dune came out so close to each other. Eternals, and just the scope of where the Eternals come from, the Celestials, and all like the cosmological giants in Marvel. There is a lot of like kind of sci-fi, I guess. There, it's comic book, but like
Yeah, Kirby had a lot of cool like
gods
stuff.
There's lots of shiny going on.
For those listening, I'm like just like waving my hands around on screen right now. Like there's a lot of that.
No, Declan, do it again. That's perfect for the thumbnail.
So I guess, and when I saw the reviews that are more mixed than I've seen for many Marvel films, I figured that it was going to be exposition heavy, especially considering subject matter. So me personally, as a fan of that side of the comics, I love the exposition. I think it's like completely necessary, and I love going into that. That's half why some of these beings have existed, to flesh out the universe of Marvel Comics, and to set like power scaling, I guess. So that's like a big part of it. I'd be interested. I think it's supposed to be the deviants, or that they call it the convergence. I don't know.
The deviants. Sorry, I'm spoiling things. They're called the deviants.
Nah, it's in the trailer though.
Yeah. I know there is deviants coming. When they say, I couldn't quite tell if it was deviants coming, because there is another plot line where, the Celestials send the Eternals to protect Earth, because there's gonna be, I think it's like a Celestial born from Earth. So, I don't know if that was a thing, but that is a plot line. The Celestials sort of have sex with planets, and then.
Oh wow, I just full.
If anyone plays World of Warcraft or knows the Warcraft universe, there is this idea, which is the Titans.
Like in Greek mythology. No, I will say that like I haven't been looking too much at the reviews for a variety of reasons. I've heard that like mixed, but I haven't heard like the precise whys of it all. What I will say is one thing I am excited about is I think I don't want to sound cliched or anything. I am excited to see them if this is like an experimentation sort of, to see sort of trying new things. I think that's good, that's good, and all that.
I mean, they already are, right? Like they filmed on location, which is not something that is often done in Marvel films. That was something that I think it was Kit Harington I saw in an interview said, I was surprised. Right? Like Game of Thrones, we were filming on location. But you look at all these other Marvel films, I thought we'd be under a roof. I thought we'd be inside. But that's a credit to Chloe Zhao, and that's something that she does in all of her films.
I mean, you saw it with Nomadland.
Exactly.
The outdoors, the on-location shoots.
Highly recommend another one of her films called The Rider. Came out in 19, I think, maybe 18.
1918.
It's a great, yes, 1918.
Thank you.
No, it's a really great film too. But that's what she's known for, is finding these beautiful locations and filming on them. I mean, granted, it was easier for Nomadland and The Rider, but and not necessarily for a big cosmic film like Eternals. But I think that will add another layer of depth to this movie that is not something you often see from the MCU.
And like half of the reason that they're doing this movie, I think, is like part experimentation, see if this works, but also I think eventually they are going to want to bring people like, Fantastic Four and Galactus, Silver Surfer, and having this like cosmic scope, I think would help a lot. They've already brought in beings like the Watcher, What If, and I think they're trying to flesh out the sort of power levels of everything, to show what the gods are, and to compare them with like whatever the big bad threat is. It sort of shows the scope of the threat, I guess. But having that level of power, especially when they've just defeated Thanos with like the Infinity Stones, I think it makes sense, because it's tough to judge. Like there's Thanos with the Infinity Stones, and now I guess with What If there's like Ultron and stuff. But before that, it was like they went straight to Thanos with the Infinity Stones, and there's no other like level. It's like he's up here, and then there's like some of the other heroes and stuff. But there are beings that are like equal to him or like above him, that do exist.
Yeah, I mean, think of the trailer for Eternals with one of the Celestials, and it's the one with like all the eyes. I don't remember. I think that's the Judge or something.
Harrison the Judge.
Yeah, like that dude's huge.
Yeah,
and the way he's introduced in the trailer is like that is a massive person, or Celeste. That is a massive being, and you should be afraid of him.
They can like adjust their size too. They can grow to the size of a planet.
I also, just on pure like surface level fanboyism. It also, I feel like, is just a little bit exciting to see Richard Madden and Kit Harington in a movie together again. I cannot wait for the scene where Richard Madden says, "Hey, wait a minute. You are Kit Harington and you're playing Dane Whitman, who's the inspiration for the character Arthur Dane in Game of Thrones." And then Kit Harington responds, "Hey, wait a minute. You're Richard Madden and you played Robb Stark on Game of Thrones. Wow." And then they, get really close.
So this
together.
is Declan's last week on the podcast. Everyone say goodbye to Declan.
Yeah, we're down to a trio next week.
Since this has started, and now I've given it to him.
Declan's been looking for, in this entire episode, you'll notice Declan's been looking for the screenwriter and the actors to just spell out exactly what's happening in the film.
He gets confused easily, so he needs a little bit of help.
Yeah.
No,
Just
but I'm really looking
extra exposition.
Exactly. I'm really looking forward to the exposition, like Ben said. I think that's something that a lot of the MCU movies are kind of lacking, is that there's a lot that's too self-explanatory, or they go too heavy on what Declan. I know, Declan, you want it, but sometimes they explain things too easily. And so if it's well written and there's lots of exposition, that I'm totally fine with that. They're introducing something new. They're introducing new concepts, and I think shows like Loki and WandaVision had the space to spell out some of the stories in ways that might have made it a little bit more pleasing to audiences. But in a movie, you have 2.5 hours. You don't have 4 hours to tell a story. Well, you do, but not this one. And so I think it's just a different way of telling a story. And I'm going to put my faith in Chloe Zhao and in Kevin Feige, because I think it's obvious it might not be a smash hit, but I feel like it will be an enjoyable movie going experience.
I feel like a lot of the plot of this movie is going to be tied to the exposition as well. Like their whole existence is based from the eternal war with like the deviants and stuff. And yeah, a lot of the reason for I don't know why they started the Eternals in the comics, but I'm pretty sure like they're doing this movie to set the stage. And it's
in the history just of Marvel Comics, Jack Kirby worked at DC for a time, and then when he returned to Marvel, and working with Stan Lee again and just being back in this world, he wanted to look more cosmically and get into these otherworldly stories. So that's when the Eternals came around, was after he got back from DC.
Yeah, I think he did start like the Celestials and stuff after that. So he had gone to DC to start another world, sort of similar, the New Genesis and Apocalypse. So Dark Side, High Father, all that stuff. He created the entire world and those characters, and you can definitely see this same scope. Dark Side is, in many ways, like the Thanos, at least these days.
Well, with the Snyder Cut, he was there for like 5 minutes in a 4-hour movie.
Oh yeah, but it's more like in the comics and stuff.
Yeah.
There's like two beings that are like big bads. One of them is like the Anti-Monitor, and then the other is Dark Side. Like
so having seen the movie, what is one thing you guys are legitimately not hoping to see out of this, but expecting to see?
I'm expecting to see Celestials.
Good one. Nice.
I am, even though I'm obviously kidding about it.
In retrospect, this was a really dumb question.
Yeah. No, what I'll say is, even though I was joking about Madden and Harrington on screen together, I am expecting / hoping for. I don't know if this is answering your question. I'm expecting Richard Madden's character to be one of the a more main character, and sort of not it being only about him, but just like I imagine he'll be a important character. I imagine he'll be an important character.
Richard Madden, and this isn't a spoiler, Richard Madden is second build behind Gemma Chan.
Yeah.
So, and Gemma Chan, just like Michelle Yeoh in Shang-Chi, is returning to the MCU in a different role than she had her first go around. Yeah, Gemma Chan was Min-Erva in Captain Marvel on the Kree Star Force.
Oh,
She was blue, so you might not have recognized her.
That's a good way of. And Declan's gone.
Sorry,
Declan.
We're jumping around on the recording here.
I apologize. That was
I'm not doing the pointing like I was last time.
Is it my turn?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm expecting sort of an unexpected connection to future movies. Like, obviously that is going to happen, but it's going to be in a way that is surprising even by Marvel standards, if that makes sense.
Yeah. We're gonna talk a lot about Eternals next week. We're all big Marvel heads.
Wait, when is everybody else seeing it?
I'm gonna try and see it tomorrow.
Okay, Declan.
I haven't planned it out yet. I'll figure something out.
All right, I'm going tomorrow.
Declan, this better not be another Venom 2 situation. You're seeing the movie by next Thursday.
No, I know. No, believe me. I'm like, I am gonna see it. It's just a matter of when. Yeah, don't worry.
Yeah, and I'm seeing it again Tuesday, so I know I'm gonna have a lot of thoughts to share. Eternals, Marvel Studios' 26th entry in the MCU, not including the TV shows. It's in theaters. I'm gonna post this video Friday morning, as per usual. It's in theaters right now. This is me speaking from the future. Go see it. We're gonna talk about it next week. Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this one. So as we change gears here. Oh, and when you go see it, again, not a spoiler, mid-credit scene and post-credit scene. So stay through it all.
All right.
That's good to know.
I already know one spoiler about the post-credit scene.
Yeah, I think I do too.
Yeah.
I haven't been paying attention, so don't allude to anything.
Thanos shows up and snaps away everybody.
No, it's zombie Thanos from What If. That would be nuts.
That would be crazy.
It's a regular Thanos who's half there. Just
Amen.
Wait, he split the universe and he killed half of life, and then he was split in half.
Oh my god.
Did you just get
Yo,
that?
I just
my
got
God.
that.
Yeah.
Alright,
Oh no.
All right. We're having a lot of fun here. Let's roll along to our weekly ranking. We're doing sci-fi and fantasy rankings, top 3. We set one ground rule before we started recording, and that's you can only pick one film per franchise. So we all have our lists. Let's just go with that way. Max, you go first.
Okay. So obviously a ranking for me is a little tricky, but I'm gonna rank 2 of them based off of pure enjoyment. And number 3 technically is Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. I grew up with Harry Potter, and as much as I detest J.K. Rowling's recent comments, I still love the franchise and what the message of the franchise stands for. The actors I essentially grew up with, and the storytelling and world building was incredible. Even the lesser movies, I still love. But Prisoner of Azkaban is up there. Number 2, Princess Bride, another movie I grew up with. Iconic for so many reasons. Instantly quotable. And it's just a great sort of fantasy film that fits for me within that realm of just like classic fantasy. Guy loves a girl, wants to save the girl. Things happen along the way, and do they end up happily ever after? Who knows? I don't know. Not going to spoil it for you, but it's a great film. And then number 1 is Arrival. For the people on the podcast that know me, they know that I love language, and Arrival is all about language and communication. And essentially, it's a film about diplomacy, and it's also beautifully made. And it's got Amy Adams in it, and can't go wrong with Amy Adams. So Arrival arrives at number 1. Should I call
Director
someone
never
else?
did
Toss
anything.
to the next person.
I tossed to Ben last week, so let me go to Declan.
Very good.
I'm sitting right here.
No,
Go ahead, Declan.
This list is in some ways difficult because I have I hate how obvious my list is. Like, it's gonna be obvious, so I'm just gonna do it. But I'm like, just know that I'm doing it with shame when I make it this obvious. So I'm gonna say for my number 3, and it's only number 3 because it doesn't fit the genre as well. Her, I think Her is a master. It's a science fiction film beyond a doubt, but it's also not a science fiction film because it's about, a love story between 2 people rather than grand. It's not some grand thing, adventure. It's just an intimate drama between 2 people, but it's utterly beautiful, breathtaking. It's up there among my favorites. It's not, again, it's not necessarily. It's only number 3 because it's hard. It's weird to call it a science fiction film, even though it also makes complete sense to call it a science fiction film for me at least. This is for me personally in my ranking. Number 2, it would be cool if I could put like Who Framed Roger Rabbit to be like, oh hey, look at me, I'm unique and I'm thinking of more unique films. But the truth of it is, it has to go to Lord of the Rings. I saw Lord of the Rings.
Which one?
Yeah, I knew someone was gonna say it.
One per franchise. We set the ground rules.
You're right.
Correct answer.
It's true. There's a part of me that wants to say Fellowship of the Ring. I don't know why, and like a month from now I'm going to disagree with myself because my opinion will change. I'm going to say Two Towers
That's the correct answer.
Just because Two Towers has like the concise, it's building up towards the Battle of Helm's Deep, and Helm's Deep is so awesome and all that. that is purely why I'm choosing Two Towers basically arbitrarily.
Yeah, the Battle of Helm's Deep is fucking sick. I mean,
It's amazing. It's one of the best battle sequences in cinema. You know, I don't think that's too controversial. Again, this is
No.
like choosing among greats, so it's hard for me to say that with like complete solidity. I'm saying Two Towers for now. Again,
that's
for now.
Saruman, like the reincarnation of Gandalf. Oh, so much fun. I love it.
Oh
That's
yeah,
the best one, I think.
fantastic. And number one, I decided to go with this really obscure film. None of us have ever heard of it. It's called Star Wars. You ever hear Star Wars? Pretty good.
Star
About
Wars?
this guy, Luke Skywalker, who's decided to become a Jedi. If you haven't
Declan's
seen Star Wars,
exploits with exposition continue.
I
This
think
is how he wants things explained to him.
I hate all of these.
In Star Wars, he wishes it started out. Have you ever heard of the Star Wars?
the like once I read George Lucas's original
His original
title
script?
crawl that had too much information, I was like, why didn't they go with that? I wanted it to go with that, but
There was some wars and stars, Jedi, Sith.
but
Oh.
also I will just
And at the
say
center of it all, a Christ metaphor.
but still, regardless, I'm choosing the first one here. Obviously, Empire can
Star
easily
Wars.
go in here as well, but I'm going with the first one. Just
The only film that was actually called Star Wars.
Star Wars.
Mm,
Yeah, A New Hope was added later.
exactly. So yeah, so Star Wars, it's amazing. It's amazing, and yeah, it's real. This is a really unique opinion, but it's my favorite sci-fi / fantasy film.
That's shocking.
Declan,
really unique.
you've got the ball. Throw it.
All right. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry,
He's also-
couldn't mute my mic there. I apologize.
I can mute you
that's
again.
why my video cut out. Anyway, regardless, I will pass the mic off to, because George was really mad at Max, and he's gonna keep complaining. No, I'm kidding. I'll pass it off to George.
Pass.
You should have passed it to Ben.
Fine. I pass it to Ben.
All right, and
All right. I guess
Wait,
I'll go.
who's go? I genuinely don't.
George, you can go.
I'll go next, and then Ben, you can take us home. Number 3 is one that I don't think a lot of people think of when they think of sci-fi fantasy, even though it's wildly popular as far as I know. My third here is Pirates of the Caribbean: The Curse of the Black Pearl. It's far and away the best film in its franchise. It starts, in my opinion, one of the best trilogies of the 21st century. We don't talk about the 4th and 5th films on this podcast.
So good.
10 men actually
yeah, I
don't
mean,
tell no tales.
based on a ride at Disneyland, turning that into one of the most successful movie franchises of the last 25 years. All-time performances: Jeffrey Rush, Johnny Depp, obviously, Orlando Bloom, Keira Knightley, Jack Davenport. I could go on and on. It's one of my favorite movies. One of the 40 some odd movies I've seen, close to 800 films in my life. One of the 40 that I consider to be perfect. The other 2 on my top 3 are also in that class. Number 2, Empire. It's the best Star Wars film. It's the best sequel of all time. The Dark Knight is a close second in that ranking for me. Empire Strikes Back. I mean, what can I say about this film that hasn't already been said by every movie analyst and critic over the last 40 years? Just being able to take the world of Star Wars, not only improve on the story of the first one, but show that this universe, this galaxy far away, could get grittier, could get darker. You see Darth Vader at his absolute darkest. It has the biggest twist in cinema history. Again, there are so many quotable moments from the film, and it's just visually fantastic. not to mention the great John Williams introducing maybe his best score piece with the Imperial March. So Empire, it's a shock to me that I didn't put this at number one. But Empire Strikes Back is, to me, the best science fiction film ever, and certainly holds a high spot in these rankings, sci-fi and fantasy. And by me calling it the best science fiction film of all time, I'm going fantasy with my top pick. Max said it in his rankings, Princess Bride. It is my favorite film of all time. Rob Reiner with the direction, Carrie Elwes, Robin Wright in her first film role. Just so many iconic.
Mandy Patinkin.
Patinkin, Andre the Giant, Wallace Shawn. Inconceivable.
He's not even in the movie that long, but we all he's so.
We associate him with it.
Inconceivable.
It's just, even Billy Crystal has a cameo for less than 5 minutes, Miracle Max, and he's one of the best parts of the movie.
Billy Crystal movie, and people would accept that. Probably.
Exactly. But yeah, Princess Bride, I just rewatched it for my class. Did you guys know I'm in film school? I just rewatched it for my class last week. It holds up every damn time. I could watch that movie every day and it wouldn't grow old. So Curse of the Black Pearl, Empire Strikes Back. I'm going in reverse order here, but number one, my all-time favorite, Princess Bride. Benji, take us home. Give us another jingle.
Third one. It was tough to choose the third one, actually. There were, I love sci-fi. I love so many movies, and there were a lot of options, but I think I'm going to have to give A Clockwork Orange my third. It's
respect.
A fantastic movie, really unique in its approach, but the whole ambience of the film, it is a very much dystopian feeling and foreign movie with semblances of things that are familiar. And I think that's sort of what he was trying to portray with, the ultra violence and how the elders characterize, the youth and their violent tendencies and delinquencies. The movie does a great job, and Malcolm McDowell, that acting is phenomenal. I have never seen an actor quite pull off the level of crazy fun in the same way that he did. There's some close ones like Gary Oldman and Leon the Professional, or there are a few, but that is a top-notch acting performance. Second one, I've already talked about it, Star Wars. It's a classic. I got to give it to the original. I give it to the original, though it's not my favorite of all of them. It's just, I think a lot of people take for granted all that movie introduced, all the sound effects, all of the ingenious ways that they created that world and creating the world too for that movie. It's a fantastic piece of filmmaking. Created an entire fantastic world for sci-fi. There's not much bad you can say about that film series. It speaks for itself, its longevity and its fandom. And then number one, it's my favorite movie of all time. It's Blade Runner. That movie to me is a masterpiece. And I will never forgive people who say Harrison Ford is acting lazy. That is one of the best acting I've ever seen from him. Perfectly captures the lazy, he's got nothing to live for. He barely cares for his own life, and it's not until the final act of the movie, when he attaches himself to Rachel, that he actually has something to live for. And you can start to see the fear and the life come back at the end, where he's actually afraid to die, whereas in the beginning he didn't care one way or the other.
It's a fantastic arc.
I think a lot of people, it is not the most exposition heavy movie, and I think that is its strength. It allows a lot of breathing room for you to view the characters as you want, and take what you want from the movie. And there's a lot of interpretations you can have for it. I criticize some sci-fi these days because while there are some fantastic visuals, there is less of the original, like, cerebral part of it, which is you, the reader or the audience, thinking about this stuff, and pulling something out of it for yourself, not that's told. And I think Blade Runner succeeds in so many ways. I mean, Rutger Hauer plays a fantastic antagonist in a way, though in many ways he is one of the most human characters in that movie. As they say, you know, they build them more human than human. And that whole movie is showcasing how the replicants are much more human. They fight for survival. They fight for each other. Whereas the Blade Runners and the people they kill for economy to, you know, make sure that their planet is safe, to ensure there's no riots, but they're barely living. And you can see that in Rick Decker. He doesn't live, not until he meets a replicant who is longing for this life, and it brings some sort of like life out of him. So Blade Runner, I can never speak enough good things about it. I think it's immaculate.
I know we've talked about it in the past, but I'll ask again for completeness sake. Is there any particular cut you are partial to?
Yeah. So the theatrical cut, I'm not a fan of the overdub. I know some people like it. They're like, oh, it's noir. And it's like, yeah, I get it, but they put in that voiceover because the studio thought that the audience was too dumb to understand the movie. It may be right, but I think it dumbs down the movie a little bit. Like I said, the movie works best when it allows you to breathe and when someone's not telling you. It's not a lot of dialogue throughout the entire movie. There are periods of it, but it's a lot of absorbing what you're
Oh,
watching.
don't tell.
Show, don't tell.
Yeah.
So
Good.
yeah, the final cut or the director's cut, to answer your question.
Mm-hmm.
Good lists all around. So you have our thoughts on Dune, which again is on HBO Max for another couple weeks, still in theaters. We've got some idea, or the other three guys have some ideas on Eternals, of course, in theaters this weekend. You know our rankings for sci-fi fantasy movies. This was my favorite rankings that we've done so far. I think there were a lot of different perspectives there.
Yeah.
So that's gonna wrap up this episode of the show. We'll be back next week. We're gonna talk Eternals. We'll have some new rankings for you. Make sure to, this is the first time I've said this, but make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We got plenty of other content on the channel, so poke around, have a look. We're gonna get some new shows in the next couple of weeks. So we'll see you next week with more of our thoughts on movies and TV. So long.
Good night.